4. Cagliari. The railway line that connects Oristano to Cagliari, the island's capital, passes through the richest and most populous region of Sardinia. The villages appear numerous, raising above the low houses, covered with red tiles, the slender campanile of their church rounded in the shape of a thimble. Fallow land became scarce and harvests followed without interruption. On each side of this plain, called Campodanno Maggiore, the eye discovers distant peaks. Several are crowned by majestic ruins.
As we left Oristano, the sky was filled with heavy clouds driven by the sea breeze towards the interior of the island. As they reached the first peaks, the clouds were unleashed and the storm broke out. A heavy rain cooled the atmosphere, and then the sun smiled again, turning the droplets hanging from the trees and telegraph wires into so many pearls of brilliant hues. It was a curious spectacle, calculated to amaze a painter, to see, after the storm, the distant mountains raising their ebony black crests above the silvery clouds that floated halfway down their sides. Cagliari, the most important city of Sarkle, is built amphitheatrically, on the seashore, on a hill surrounded by ponds. Its houses, with windows lined with mucharabes, spread their terraces in tiers as far as the Castello, a vast fortress that dominates the entire city and commands its approaches. Near the bastions stretches the Buon Camino promenade, from where the view embraces an immense panorama. From here you can see the fertile plain of Cagliari with its white villages, its roads, its paths, and the hedges of prickly pear cactus whose long thorny snowshoes cling to the rocks and invade every corner of the earth. Closer, a circle of gardens encloses the city. The long plumes of date palms and dwarf palms rising from all sides give this landscape an oriental aspect. In the distance, towards the interior, as a frame, are bluish mountains, and on the south side, the salt pans, the ponds, the gulf flooded with light, peopled with sails and fishing boats, the endless horizon of the sea merging with the sky. From the fortress, occupied by the battalions of Cacciatori Franchi, Frankish chasseurs, disciplinary companies of the Italian army, converge the tortuous but clean streets of Cagliari, and descending to the port. In Cagliari, we find ourselves in the middle of civilization. Trade and navigation are active there. Regular steamship services connect this city with the main Italian ports and even with Tunis. But there is no industry and little education. Cagliari, however, it has a university as rich in teachers as it is in students. 50 students are taking the courses. A characteristic sign is that in this town of 30,000 inhabitants, there is only one bookseller. His shop is still very cramped and closed every day from 11 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock. On the other hand, many newspapers are printed on it, which children shout in the streets with strange inflections in their voices. To sum up, the island of Sardinia, although less picturesque than Corsica, is not without interest. Its population is curious to see and to study. The observer, a lover of local color, will find these primitive and wild types that have disappeared everywhere else. Civilization has barely touched this great island. It has only really established its empire in its two principal cities. The interior, and especially the mountain countries, are occupied by a backward and barbarous people, devoted to ignorance and superstition. However, this island is more fertile than Corsica, its neighbor. Its plains produce grain in abundance, innumerable herds roam its pastures, and every spring 20 or 30 cattle are loaded at Porto Torres bound for Marseilles. Oil and wine abound. Forests of pines, larches and holm oaks climb the slopes of its mountains, and the remote gorges contain mines of great richness. Several foreign companies, both French and English, have established themselves here and exploit the precious Sardinian iron ore, which was already known to the Romans and which is one of the most beautiful in the world. But despite everything, this country continues to be one of the most backward, the most abandoned in Italy and even in Europe. Communications are difficult and there are no roads to bring products from the interior to the ports of embarkation. The method of cultivation is quite elementary. The land is still plowed there as in the days of the patriarchs. A plowshare at the end of a pole, such as the Sardinian plow, agricultural implements made of iron or steel are exceedingly rare. Equipped with crude machinery, the peasant sweats blood and water from dawn to night to scrape the surface of a fertile land which, if better cultivated, would produce abundant harvests. An unbroken belt of unhealthy ponds borders the island, and the feverish fumes they exhale poison the atmosphere and spread disease and death everywhere. Thus, the population is puny, sickly, and the average of existence is low. Sardinia is a place of punishment and exile for civil servants. It has the only penal colony in Italy. From the intellectual and moral point of view, the island is no more favored. It is the last region of the kingdom in terms of education. It is even second only to Sicily and the Neapolitan country. Out of 100 Sardinians, 88 cannot read or write. In vain did the government set up schools, and the indifferent population shunned them. We know what evils ignorance engenders, superstition is not the least. The Sardinian is plagued by prejudice and routine. He still practices blood feuds and banditry, extinct in Calabria, compressed in Sicily, and still reappears from time to time in the Tyrrhenian island. The Avvenire di Sardegna of October 24 announced that at Nuri, a large village situated a few leagues from Cagliari, 25 men surrounded the house of a notable during the night, ill-treated him, and robbed him of 1,200 lire. We have already spoken of the arrests of stagecoaches with armed robbery on the road to Sassari. The naturalness of the Sardinian, however, is not cruel. He is less violent, less tough than his neighbor in Sicily, only poverty leads him to crime. For a long time, the country's products sold poorly. Wines, grains, and olive oils are only sold at low prices. Hence a deep discomfort that extends to the entire population of the island. In addition, the country is burdened with numerous and excessive taxes. The Italian government, in order to meet the considerable expenses caused by the maintenance of an army of nearly 500,000 men, of an administration with many cogs, by public works of the first necessity, the government, in the presence of an ill-balanced budget, and in agreement with the chambers, had to create crushing taxes, taxes on salt, on grinding, on transportation, on cars, huge property tax, etc. The Sardinians, poor in advance, are overwhelmed by these taxes and cannot pay, debts accumulate, need drives them to theft and robbery. Italy, with its cannonballs at its feet, Sardinia, Sicily, the Neapolitan country, Italy is advancing with difficulty in the harsh path traced out for peoples by the harsh demands of modern life. Its financial situation constantly oscillates between the increase in debt and tax on basic needs. His cabinets, unable to form a lasting majority in parliament, failed one after the other. Continual elections agitated the country, which was already subject to the machinations of the clerics. The profound ignorance of the working classes does not yet permit the establishment of universal suffrage, the only basis of a democratic regime, but which at that time would be in Italy only an instrument of domination for the priests and of death for national unity. However, King Humbert's government was liberal in the broadest sense of the word. Ministers are shrewd, and considerable progress is being made. If southern Italy is 2 centuries behind the clock of civilization, the vitality of the peoples of the north is so powerful that they will be able to drag these backward sisters of the south into the vast arena of labor and unification. Already, under the enlightened influence of the House of Savoy, Italian industry was developing, universities were multiplying, railways crisscrossed the peninsula in all directions, linking the most remote and savage regions to the great cities. Let Italy be able to impose silence on the spirit of adventure and excessive militarism, and, with the help of peace, the financial situation improving, banditry and begging being repressed, education spreading everywhere, the homeland of Dante and Alfieri will see the opening of a better and prosperous era.